Baseball fans, it is time once again for another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. With over 50 years in professional baseball and making a multitude of fantastic relationships along the way, Frank Coppenbarger shares great stories with weekly guests from various areas inside of the game. It's all here on the Fans First Sports Network. Let's get ready to play ball. Here's Frank Coppenbarger.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. And a special Happy New Year to all of you. We hope you had great holidays. And now that the calendar has turned to January, we can see baseball in the near future. And our guest today is a longtime baseball man. I'm proud to say a longtime friend of mine. Most recently, the manager of the Atlanta Braves, still with the ball club, Mr. Brian Snitker. Snit, welcome.
Well, thanks, Frank. Happy New Year. It's great to be with you.
So good to have you. One thing that Brian and I have in common, we were both born in Decatur, Illinois, and not too far apart either, actually. But Snit lived most of his life in a small community called Macon, Illinois, just south of Decatur, where he was a baseball star, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But Snit, growing up near Decatur, and one of the elite travel programs back in those days, they didn't have travel baseball like they do now. American Legion Baseball was a top-of-the-line baseball program, and many of us wanted to be on that post-105 team in Decatur. Not all of us were good enough to be on it, but you were. And some of your Macon teammates also. And share with us a little bit about it. Talk about Legion ball back then, and we'll talk further about where you played the game and all that.
Well, that was American Legion was kind of when baseball started getting real. I mean, we played in the little Meridian Conference, the small towns and communities, but when you got a chance to make the American Legion team, I mean, that was something else. And, you're very proud. And I remember the coach is, he had $8 hats because they were fitted hats. We'd never had a fitted hat before. And when I was in high school, our hats were Caterpillar tractor hats.
Yeah.
And things like that. So, but I mean, it was really good baseball. We drew from all the big high schools around Decatur, and a lot of really, really good talent, that came through there. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was, you were starting to cut your teeth on baseball when you got to the American Legion program. And the majority of probably about everybody went on to play college baseball out of that program.
Well, and then in those days, too, a Legion ball was a big deal all over the country. And a lot of professional scouts attended those games. I'm sure Richie Klaus of the Giants, who was a Decatur native and a former manager of the team in Decatur, I'm sure he was probably at every one of your games.
Oh, he was. I remember at one point when they were talking about, he was all over the TV when they were talking about getting rid of the Commodores and right. But like I say, there, a lot of colleges coaches were there, the professional scouts, a lot of guys went on and played pro ball out of that program. And, it was great. I mean, I was very fortunate to have American Legion Baseball. And it's, guys today really don't understand what, that was kind of our perfect games and things like that the kids have now. But it was an honor to play American Legion Baseball.
Well, you guys played your home games at a place called Fans Field, which is near and dear to my heart. That's basically where I spent every summer from fifth grade through the year I graduated high school, which was 1974. And for you listeners and viewers, Fans Field was a minor league ballpark in Decatur, and it was the home of the Decatur Commodores, which was a Class A Midwest League farm club of the San Francisco Giants. So you were actually out on a professional field playing those games. Had to be pretty special.
No, well, you know what? We thought we were, in the major leagues when we went there. I mean, we grew up and there wasn't any grass on any of the fields that we played on. So we went to Fans Field. We had real dugouts. There was a grass infield, fences, with all the, the sponsors and everything like that. I mean, it was a big deal because I remember as a kid, I'd go up and throw batting practice to the Decatur Commodore, the players. And I used to love, I'd drive up from Macon just to watch infield because I used to love to watch those guys throw. And but it was special, it was an old wooden ballpark. But I'm going to tell you what, man, it was a Taj Mahal for us when we were playing there.
I've often said that, it was a dilapidated, rundown old wooden ballpark, but it was the finest place in the land when I was growing up. To get to go to Fans Field before I was working there, and I started working there at the age of 11, believe it or not, fifth grader. I was a bat boy for the team the summer of my fifth grade year. And Snit, I had no idea that for the next 50-some years I was going to be hanging around the dugout and the clubhouse, but that's where it all started.
Well, you know what, Frank? There's a lot of offspring of baseball guys that end up doing that. I mean, they don't know any better. It's kind of like we grew up, I'm sure polishing shoes and hanging up uniforms and, making sure the equipment was taken care of. And you know what? You ended up having a great career in professional baseball. And, I grew, raised my son on a baseball field and in a bus and a dugout and a clubhouse. And that's why I said he kind of came by it naturally. So, and you know what? There's nothing wrong with that either.
Oh, not at all. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, what a life I've been able to lead, and the people I've gotten to know and meet over the years, and places I've been able to go. And it all started there. And I can close my eyes and picture the place. And I remember when I had a key to it. I think I was a freshman or sophomore in high school and actually had a key to the gate. I could get in whatever I wanted. And my dad used to go over there with me on Sundays and hit fly balls and throw to me and all kinds of stuff. And, it was a great time for sure. But not only were you on the Legion team, your high school baseball team, then known as Macon High School, now known as Meridian.
Right.
You guys were the Cinderella story of the state of Illinois in 1971. I have to say, you guys were Hoosiers before the Hoosiers movie.
Yeah, you know what? We were.
You were.
We
Absolutely.
were. It was, as a matter of fact, I watched Hoosiers on Christmas Eve. I was cleaning up around the house, and that reminds me a lot of our story. And it was something else, and have great memories of that, and still, love thinking about it to this day.
So I want to talk about that a little bit, because the mighty Macon Ironmen, you guys were a bunch of free spirits, a little different than the prototypical kid back in those days. And you had a coach by the name of Lynn Sweet, who was a teacher at your high school. And from everything I've read, and you can elaborate more, he basically got to be the coach by default because nobody else wanted to do it. Is that right?
That's right. I think the year before, Jack Burns, our head football coach, took it over. I think he took it over because nobody would either. And, and then Lynn did the same thing. I mean, Jack didn't know anything about baseball. And if you asked Lynn, he'd probably tell you the same thing. But you know what? We were also close back then. I mean, it was a small community. We all played all the sports, and the guys that could sing would be the leads in the plays and stuff like that. And but we were all very close. I mean, we hunted, fished, played ball together. It was a great group of guys. I think everybody on the club ended up playing college baseball somewhere, and a couple of us went on to play professional baseball. And it was great, I mean, Sweet was, he was a friend, and nobody ever took advantage of that. We had great relationship, and it was a great group of guys, and we were pretty good baseball players as a group. I'll tell you that too.
Well, as the season went on, you certainly proved that you were good ball players, really good ball players. You guys finished second in the state, and back in those days, there was a one-class tournament. So picture this, ladies and gentlemen. Macon High School had about 250 students. They played against Lane Tech High School out of Chicago for the Illinois State Championship. Lane Tech had 400 kids go out for the baseball team. and had 4,500 students enrolled in their high school. Macon, with a population of only 1,200. I mean, you talk about David versus Goliath. You guys took them right to the wire. They beat you, but you finished second in the state. You were all of our heroes, I can tell you that. We were all jealous while you guys were moving on through the state playoffs, and it was a fabulous year, and I want you to talk about it a little bit.
It was great. You know what? We just, I don't think when I was in high school that we lost a conference baseball game, in the whole 4 years I was there. And we were going to go pretty far. The year before, we had an ineligible player that they hadn't put on the roster, and he ended up helping us win a game. And I remember it was at Fans Field in the tournament, and then we might have had a better team the year before, quite honestly, and but we got disqualified, and that was kind of a bitter pill to swallow right there, and but you know what, we bounced back the next year, and we got into the playoffs, and we started bumping off all these bigger schools, and you know what, we didn't know any better. We were having the time of our lives. I mean, we had been introduced to Jesus Christ Superstar that spring, and by the priest at the Catholic Church there in Macon, St. Stanislaus, and we had it, an 8-track tape of it going on while we were warming up, and we had it on the bus, and to this day I still listen to it on my way to spring training and know every word of it. So we were kind of, I don't know that we knew any better. We were just having fun, literally having fun, and just for kind of riding the crest as long as it would take us. And you know what, we're fortunate to get to where we were, and we had a ball doing it.
Well, I was blessed to know several of the guys, not only yourself, but Steve Schartzer, who was your top pitcher, who was drafted by the Cardinals, played the Cardinal farm system. I went to college with Sam Trustner and Jeff Glenn and Stu Arnold, the late Stu Arnold, at Millikan University. And, that's half your team, because you didn't have a very big roster.
No, we didn't. Yeah. And you know what? If you see the team pictures, it looked like everybody had a different uniform on too. Yeah. We just kind of piled all that together. But you're right. I mean, it was, like I said, everybody went. Those guys you said, they all played baseball at Millikan. I think Sam's a Hall of Fame trainer and equipment manager now.
Yeah, he is.
He took that and had a great career at Millikan, and so everybody, kind of used that springboard of that small little town to do really good things with themselves. And like I say, everybody went to college, and a few of us got to play pro baseball. So it was a great stepping stone for us, and a lot of great memories.
So speaking about that year, that special year of 1971, years later, there was a really nice article written in Sports Illustrated by a guy named Chris Ballard about that team. And it was a big spread in the magazine back when Sports Illustrated was still a pretty serious sports magazine. And from that, he wrote a book about it called One Shot at Forever. I bought that book in a bookstore in New York. We were there for 3 days. And by the time we played the last game, I had read it all. It was terrific. And there's even been some talk about possibly doing a movie over that year.
Yeah, no, it was. It was really cool. It was great. Chris I think he wrote the story, and there was he got a hold of the whole thing and wrote the story, and I've gotten to know him over the years. And I think what happened was he kind of fell in love with all the guys when he went to Macon, and he did his background work, and he'd go up to the local tavern and drink a beer and get talking. And, he really enjoyed Lynn and his wife, Jeannie, and all the guys there. And I think he, after he did that story, and I remember when that came out, because I remember like today, we were playing the White Sox, and I remember I was riding around town trying to find a copy of it. And actually the clubhouse guy there in Chicago had a copy before it was on the newsstand. So, it was pretty cool. And then getting to meet Chris and getting to know him and all was really neat. And when he did the book, and you're right, it's a good read. And I remember I learned a lot of stuff about it. I was living it, and I still didn't know some of that stuff that he unearthed when he wrote that book. So, and I still, to this day, I remember, because I was a third base coach when it came out. I remember walking around. I'd go to that bookstore at Rittenhouse Square there in Philly, and peruse the aisles and buy all the spare copies that they had, and things like that. And I still try and keep a couple of copies for people that, if I know, I start, talking about this and people know about it, and I'll get them a copy. And you can't believe how many copies around the league I've signed over the years too, when we'd go in and play at these visiting ballparks.
I'm sure. Well, I've got 2 copies. The one I bought in New York, and then a few years later, you guys had a book signing, which I'm not sure you were able to go to it because you were working, but the rest of the team was there, those that were still alive, and they all signed it, and some of them wrote messages to me in the book, the guys that I knew, and I treasure that too. So, Snit, before we move on, if my memory serves me correct, and my wife always says that I can remember the most amazing details of things that aren't that important, but they're important to me.
Yeah.
And if I recall, the championship game was played on the day that the high school graduation ceremony was scheduled to take place. Am I right?
That's right. That's right.
And they postponed that ceremony till like 11 or 12 o'clock at night, till the team and all the fans could get home. And that's when it started. Am I right about that?
Yeah, no, it is. I remember, it's kind of like if there wasn't going to be anybody there because the whole town was in Peoria.
Exactly.
And a lot of, we drew a lot of fans from the teams that we beat to get to the championship game too. So we had a big convoy coming from Peoria, and I think it started like midnight or something like that. I'm sure there were a lot of parents there that had kids graduate and weren't real happy that we did all that. But you know what? I mean, I think it was really good for our community and our town. And just, that was a big deal that we all came together as a community, not just as a team and the players, but, all the guys that played other sports and the parents. And it was really cool. To this day, I see old pictures and you can look and recognize people in there. And I think they said it was first class that ever graduated in 2 days. Or 2 days, for such a small town to graduate. So,
well, I'm sure that was the biggest event in Macon history. And it takes some doing to top that.
Well, you know what? Actually, I think they won the state basketball championship, not too long ago but it wasn't Macon, it was Meridian then.
Right. So. Right. So it's a big deal. And as I said, it was a one-class tournament in those days, and that's mighty impressive. But moving on, following your graduation from high school, you went to Lincoln College, and Snit, you're old. The place isn't even open anymore. It's closed up nowadays, but you played ball over there for a couple years and graduated from Lincoln College, and then moved on to the University of New Orleans, where you played there for 2 seasons, as well as being a student. And you were drafted by the Cubs after your junior year, but you chose not to sign. And then your senior year, you signed as a free agent with the Braves. So that was 1977.
Yep.
Talk about all that.
Well, it was pretty cool. I had a great time at Lincoln College. I'm glad I went and played junior college because you got to play. My coach was a guy named Chuck Lindstrom, whose dad, Freddie, is actually in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Played in the World Series, I think, at 18. And I remember he used to come back and see Chuck, and he was an older gentleman at the time, but that sucker could still hit. I mean, he'd get in that batter's box, and he would just rake,
Oh, that's unbelievable.
And it was, so we ended up going, myself and a guy named Mike Swingle, who was a big 2-sport athlete in Lincoln.
From Lincoln High School,
at University of New Orleans, and the coach there, Ron Maestri, was from Peoria, so he did a lot of recruiting from the Midwest, and had a great time there. I I was drafted by the Cubs. This old scout there saw me play a couple of games at the beginning of the year, and then I got hurt and tore my thumb up and missed the majority of that season. So after I got drafted, I decided not to sign because I hadn't played all spring. And I just figured if I went in like that and I didn't do good, then they'd kick me out the door or whatever. And
right.
So I went back and then I played. So I didn't play and I got drafted. Then I went back and played and didn't get drafted. So that kind of tells you where my playing abilities were.
Well, somebody like you, the Braves like you, and you know what? They were pretty smart, as it turns out.
Well,
so you signed with the Braves in '77, and the last time I checked, you're still getting a paycheck all these years later.
I know, you're right. 50 years later, I'm still fooling them.
Yeah. So you bounced around the minor leagues. I would say the lower minor leagues for a few seasons, but clearly they had their eye on you. They liked you. You were released as a player in 1980 and immediately joined the organization as an instructor. Mm-hmm. And I have to ask you, who was the farm director at that time when you were hired?
Yeah, that's a pretty good one, So I remember Hank called me and asked me, they were going to release me so I could, and I stayed with the AA club in Savannah because my arm was still solid and all, so I could throw a lot of batting practice. But, Hank was the farm director. Actually, I think maybe his first year to do that was when right after he stopped playing and is when I signed with the Braves. And so, I was really fortunate that he saw something in me and offered me an opportunity to keep going. And absolutely, I jumped at it because, I probably would have went back and I'd went back, right after I got drafted and went to a semester of college, but that kind of wasn't for me. So, I started coaching and then he gave me my chance at managing and in the minor leagues and kind of just stuck with it. And you know what? Here I am 50 years in and still kicking.
Well, I want to clear something up for the casual fan that might be watching this that might not know who this guy Hank is that he's referring to. That's none other than Hank Aaron, ladies and gentlemen. He was the farm director of the Braves when Brian Snitker was there as a player and started his career as a coach and a manager. But we'll come back and we'll talk to Snit some more about his coaching and managing right after these messages. Okay, we're back with Brian Snitker, and we're just about to start in on his long, brave career. We've already covered his playing years. Now it's time to talk about coaching. Your first job as a coach after you got released as a player was what, Snit?
It was, I stayed with the AA team, and then I remember like 3 weeks in, I got a call from Hank, and he wanted me to go to Bradenton. So I went down there to the rookie. That's where our rookie league team was at Pirate City. They shared one there with Pittsburgh. And so I kind of oversaw the pitchers that year. When the next year I rode, it was myself and Cito Gaston were kind of, back then, we're the only rovers that we had. Now you got them all over the place. And,
oh, yeah.
So I spent most of my time that year in AAA. There was an older manager, and Johnny Sane was the pitching coach. Eddie Haas was the manager, and so they needed some young guy in there to do all the work. So I, throw the batting practice and hit all the ground balls and stuff like that, coach first and third and things like that. So, and it was good. I moved around that year and got to be with a lot of different managers and things like that. Saw a lot, different levels. And the next year, Hank offered me my first managing job in Anderson, South Carolina. So that's kind of where all that started.
So in addition to Anderson, you also managed in, ironically, Macon, Georgia. Yeah. Myrtle Beach, Greenville, the Mississippi Braves, the Richmond Braves, and the Gwinnett Braves later on. So a lot of stops in the Brave organization, moving up all the time. Anything stand out from all those years? I know you had a couple of championship teams, and you certainly saw a lot of great players come up because the Braves were solid for a long time.
Long time. A lot of great players, a lot of great experiences. The people, you know what? It was just a good time. I mean, you went out, nobody, you know, we all wanted to do good for Hank. I mean, he'd give us a team, and we, you know, it'd be like, give me a team, I'm going to give you a better product at the end of the summer. And he treated you with a lot of respect. He gave you a lot of leeway and responsibility, and you know, he'd call once a week, Hank, and first thing he'd ask, how's the family, and then he'd, you know, see if we needed anything, and he was great. He was awesome to work for, and he kind of, like I said, he let you do your job, and there's some great cities there. We had 3 of the best years of my life in Myrtle Beach when I was there, and we brought the kids with us, and you know, they'd surf, and you know, it was always a family affair with us too. I mean, Ronnie had dragged the kids all around the Southeast, and you know, I remember we left Myrtle Beach. The field wasn't quite ready yet because it was brand new, and we got on a bus and went on like an East Coast swing up to the north, and they stayed there. And I remember Ronnie helped get the pro shop together and get the clubhouse together, and things like that. So and I remember too going to some places at the 7th inning stretch, they'd give my daughter Erin a microphone and prop her up in the stands, and she'd sing "Take Me Out to the." Well, she'd say, "Take me out to my daddy's team," is how she said.
Is that right? That's
yeah.
So cool.
And then Troy, Bat Boy, and Ronnie would kind of mother all the wives and girlfriends and things like that were there, and it was a family affair for a lot of years, and a lot of really good. You know what? We had to balance our checkbook to go to Kroger, and we'd get into town, and Ronnie would go to the consignment store and buy a set of bunk beds and for the kids, and we'd sleep on a mattress on the floor. And you know, back then too, you always shared. You get a 3-bedroom apartment because the pitching coach and the trainer would be in there with us.
Yeah.
And, but you know what? You did anything to make ends meet. We didn't make any money, but you know what? We had the time of our lives. It was so much fun being with all those young players, and the experiences and all the people we met in the different communities, and still friendships that we have today. I mean, and everybody that, you know, their children are adults now with kids of their own and things like that. So there's a lot of really, really good times in the minor leagues back when we were coming up.
Well, and when you first started, if it's anything like the Giants were, you didn't have very many coaches either, did you?
No, we had usually it was a manager and a pitching coach, and that was it.
Yeah.
And that's why you had to, you know, throw all the batting practice, hit all the ground balls. You know, I remember one time Ronnie came in Anderson, South Carolina. She came in, we were there early one morning, and, you know, they were doing laundry, and the poor old washing machine was just barely moving, and she stopped it and took it. She, you know, because the trainers were the bus drivers, the clubhouse kids, They did the laundry, everything. I mean, those poor guys had a thankless job. So I remember she took everything out of the washer, and heck, half of it didn't even get wet, you know. So she went back and re-washed all the clothes, and we wonder why we all ran around with jock itch all the time. But she went back and did all that, and then, you know, but it was just, you know what, that was just kind of one of the things that you did.
Yeah. Today's guys have no idea what it was like, or what people endured. I mean, I can recall as a kid being in Decatur, and my dad, you know, had a role there with the Decatur Ball Club. And one year, the Giants farm director was in town, and Mom and Dad had the gift shop at the hotel where the team stayed. And my dad said to the farm director, he said, his name was Jack Schwartz. And he says, you know, Jack, it's kind of embarrassing when one of the Decatur players gets injured. The trainer for the other team has to run out and attend to him. We didn't even have a trainer. And people wouldn't even believe that, but it's true. And he said to my dad, if you can find a qualified trainer, you know, that'll work for a small sum of money, you hire him and we'll pay him. And my dad found the only trainer Decatur ever had, a guy out of Bloomington. Somehow Dad got wind of him and hired him, and and he was our trainer the last 2 or 3 years we had a team. Up until then, and we're talking in the early 70s, not even a trainer. Unbelievable.
Right. You know what? Probably those guys played every day too, because there wasn't somebody to treat all the injuries, and they're, you know what, they were doing it themselves. And they probably weren't getting hurt as much either, because there wasn't anybody suffering, putting their hands on them. I remember too. I tell people, when I signed, I didn't even have a locker till I got to AA. You had a hook on a wall,
right?
And you used to shower on pallets just to get off the concrete,
right? Because it was flooding in the shower all the time.
Yeah, all the time. So,
exactly.
I mean, it was like, holy cow! Some of these kids coming now from all these big schools and everything. It's like the major leagues there.
Oh yeah.
It was something else. You ride on a bus with no air conditioning and all that. So
all that stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's all we do, and it was our big leagues. We loved it.
Yeah. No, you're right. We did. We didn't know any better, but we were playing pro ball. I remember I wrote a letter home to my mom, and I signed. I said, I can't believe they're paying me to play baseball.
Well, it's fortunately for you, they started paying you more at the end of your career.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's talk about finally getting a big league break. So in '85, you actually got an opportunity to be a bullpen coach for the Braves. You were there for a year, then came back in '88 through '90 in the same role. And then in the meantime, going back to the minor leagues and managing and all through the Braves organization. And then back in '07, you got an opportunity to be the third base coach for the legendary Hall of Fame manager, Bobby Cox. And talk about him.
Yeah. What an honor that was. And probably after, looking back on my managerial career in the major leagues, it's funny how things happen, because, you never know what this job's about till you get it. But man, them 4 years I had being Bobby's third base coach was what an education that was. And getting to watch one of the best to ever do it, manage, and how he treated people, and how he just, the professionalism, and like I say, the biggest thing was that I remembered is there was he made everybody at the ballpark feel like they were the most important person there. And he had a unique way about him, and the patience that he had, and everything. It was awesome.
Well, I'm going to expound on what you just said, because I will never forget this as long as I'm around. And 2026, the All-Star game is going to be in Philadelphia. But in 1996, the game was in Philadelphia. I was in charge of the home clubhouse. Bobby was the manager, because the Braves won the World Series in '95. So he and his coaches were there. The game ends. Mike Piazza hit a home run. He was the MVP of the game. When the game ended, Bobby went around to everybody in that room and came and found me too and shook my hand. You'd have sworn he made me feel like I hit that home run.
Yeah.
I mean, everything I did was the most important thing. And the way he made me feel of his entire all-star experience in Philadelphia. I mean, the guy was just so good. And, it was hard to root for him because you guys were beating us all the time. But I rooted for him because he's such a class act.
No, he was, and he still is. And it's just, I learned so much from him, and I used to sit by him when he'd do media, and I leaned on, I really, after he had his stroke and he couldn't come around, I really missed him, because I leaned on him a lot when I first got this job. Every time I call, he'd answer, and I used to call a lot because, there was a lot of stuff going on, but it just the way he treated people, and how he carried himself, and how he treated his players, with respect, and he understood that the game's really hard to play. And so I was very fortunate and blessed to be able to be his third base coach for his last 4 years. And like I say, he'd come in every day when I was managing, and like 6:15 with a cup of coffee, and we'd sit and talk, and then I'd go out for the game, and he'd go up and watch the game. So it was pretty special having him around.
Very cool. Very cool. And I was really excited that I got to be up in Cooperstown when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I was there for his induction ceremony, and it was special. And I remembered how well he had treated me. And after that All-Star game, for all those years later, he always knew me by name and would stop and talk for a few minutes. I mean, just a super guy. But after 13, you had to go back to the minor leagues for a couple years. The Braves put their AAA team in Gwinnett, which is a suburb of Atlanta, and at least you were able to manage the ball club there and kind of be at home. But I know that had to be a disappointment to you. But you handled it like you always handled everything else, and you took care of business there. And in 2016, the things didn't go so well for the big club in Atlanta, and they made a change, and they brought you up from Gwinnett as the interim manager, and you weren't interim too long because you took over and you stayed there for the next 10 years. So another congratulations on that.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I never thought I'd manage one day in the big leagues, let alone 10 years. And, you know, it's a lot of recycles I went through to get to that point too. But, you know, things happen for a reason. I remember when I kind of got recycled after 13, I think it was, and we went to the division. The Dodgers beat us out, and I remember going home, and the day after we got back from LA, I remember I got a call. They wanted me to come to the ballpark. So I went in there and met with the general manager, and we had heard that there was going to be a tweak maybe in the staff. But I can remember I go in there and I left, and I was in the parking lot, and I called my good friend Greg Walker, who was our hitting coach, and I said, "Well, Walk, I'm the tweak." You know, so went back, and, you know, we're fortunate that the AAA team was in Gwinnett, and I was probably the only one of the 30 AAA managers that was staying in his own house and sleeping in his own bed, and worked out good. My mom was in an assisted living right down the street from that ballpark, and, you know, I kind of looked at it like, you know, if something happened to her, I could step away and take care of her at that time of her life. And, you know, if you're coaching third, it's kind of hard to miss a day or two, you know, because not everybody can do that job. So, and then, you know, I just kind of, it's what we do. You know what? We just keep fighting and keep fighting the fight and grinding. And you know, it's something that we love. And at that point in time, I kind of thought like, well, maybe I'm, you know, at some point I thought maybe I would get a chance to manage in the minor league or major leagues. And then when that happened, I just kind of set my sights, said, well, maybe it won't happen. And you know what? I was okay with it. I said I wasn't going to let that define my career or who I was. And I was going to do the best job I could, you know, in Gwinnett. And then when the call came, it was kind of a shocking thing. But you know what? I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to try it out and see how it was, and ended up being pretty good.
Well, I can recall reading near the end of that 2016 season, it seemed like to a man, those players basically demanded that you be the manager. And that says so much about you. I can remember Fran Coor and all these different guys speaking out on your behalf. And the Braves did the right thing. They made you the manager and full time. And you were there till you decided you had enough at the end of last year. And quite a run. You were manager of the year more than once. You were the world champions in 2021. And you beat your son in the World Series, your son Troy, who was a coach for the Astros. And I know when you and I talked, obviously you're proud of your son, but you were most proud is he got that job with the Astros on his own. You know, you didn't make calls for him. You even told me, you said, I would have called for him, but he said, no, I want to do this on my own.
Yeah, he did.
And he did, and he's still doing it. He's with the Mets now, going to be with the Mets starting in 2026. And, you know, kudos to him, but that had to be pretty special in the World Series. And, you know, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. How did Ronnie handle that?
Well, you know what? She handled it about as good as you can, I think. I mean, it was a special time for our family, our whole family, and everybody, and the grandkids, and my daughter and her husband. Everybody got to go with us and travel with us. And my daughter and Ronnie, they had their, you know, two-sided jerseys with the Astros, the Braves, and coats and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, it was like I say, taking the lineup card out there at the World Series to your son is a pretty special time. I remember I thank Dusty to this day for allowing Troy to do that when I see him, and it's pretty special. I mean, he's done a great job. You're right. He didn't let me talk. I told him, I said, we kind of network in this industry, and I'm going to get you an audience. I'm not going to get you a job, but I'm going to get you an audience with people. And he wanted nothing to do with it. And you know what he did? He taught himself Spanish, and that was attracted to the Astros.
Yeah.
I think he impressed them right from the get-go with his work ethic and knowledge and how he handles himself. And so he's done really well in his career, and now he's starting a new chapter with the Mets, and has been working really hard, getting to know their players this whole winter. So I'm very proud of him and his work ethic, and he's a good kid and really good with people and very knowledgeable. And, he's a great mix with that analytic world and the old school baseball that he grew up in.
Well, the Braves are wise to have kept you on board. You're going to be in like a senior advisory role this year, and you'll be a huge asset to them. But I'm going to miss turning on my TV and not seeing you in the dugout and not going down to the ballpark there in Philly. I'd make a special trip. I drove an hour and 15 minutes to see you more than once.
Yeah.
We're two old guys from Decatur. It's got 100 years in the big leagues between the two of us. That's pretty good.
No, it is. Like I said, you said earlier, I was like, who'd ever thought a couple of guys from the Midwest and Decatur, Illinois are sitting here and like you said, with 100 years of baseball experience, and you spearheading your own podcast now and everything. So it's been a great, like you said earlier, I mean, this game, you make great relationships and friends and longtime friends, like you said, like we are, and it's a pretty special industry that we're in, and the brethren that we all share.
Without a doubt. And I can't thank you enough for being our guest today. It's Snit. All the best in 2026 and in the years ahead. And thanks so much for joining us today on Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. And ladies and gentlemen, 50 years with the Atlanta Braves and counting.
Yeah.
You don't get too many employees that work 50 years in one place anymore. The great Brian Snitker. Folks, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Fans First Sports Network, and we'll be back next week with another special guest.
On April 29th, 2021, Meridian High School rededicated their field and renamed it to Brian Snitker Field to commemorate all of his contributions to the game of baseball and to the town, also to commemorate the 1971 state runner-up Macon Ironman. Thank you for listening to another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks with Frank Coppenbarger. Tune in next week for another great episode on the Fans First Sports Network.